My celebration dinner turned into chaos when my estranged stepsister crashed it, dropping a bombshell that shattered everything. I, F32, hosted a dinner party for family recently to celebrate my new promotion. I was very happy and proud of myself because I earned this after slaving away at my corporate job for months. Only my partner Keith, M37, knows how hard I have worked for it. But what was meant to be a celebration of my success, hosted by me, ultimately became about something else. Now everyone is after me because they think I'm cruel and vindictive and don't understand the value of family. I grew up in a blended family. My biological mother left my dad for her boss when I was just 2 years old, so she has never been a part of my life. It has been dad and me for the longest time, and I am not complaining. My mom never tried to reach out, and while a lot of my family thought that I would want to seek her out when I grew up, that was not true at all. I have no desire to meet my biological mother or reconnect with her, even though my stepmother and don't see eye to eye. I have never had a real maternal figure in my life, not in my mother and not in my stepmother. And 53F. Dad married her when I was already old enough to have begun navigating life without a mother, and there was always resistance from both sides to accept each other as family. As a child, I used to look at my friends with complete families, siblings, and cousins, and I would feel very envious and dejected that I was not given this luxury. However, I just accustomed myself to my own reality, and since then, coping with life has become easier. My Aunt Rosa, Dad's sister, tried her best to cultivate that bond with me, and I am very grateful for everything that she has done for me. But, and I mean this in the least hurtful way possible, an aunt is not a mother. I don't blame my dad for anything, though. I think he did the best that he could, and even though when I was a kid and a teenager I didn't like a lot of things that he did, and we fought a lot over silly issues, as an adult I realized the enormous sacrifices he has made for me. The family dynamics were out of my control to a very large extent, and as they were out of his control, but we managed. Dad married Anne when I was 15 years old, even though they had been together for a while before that. He had repeatedly asked me if I was okay with him remarrying, and I know for sure that had I said no, he wouldn't have gone ahead with it. But by then, I knew that despite Anne and I not having a very good relationship, she made him happy. And I also knew that both of us loved Dad enough to be cordial to each other and make the family work somehow. While he was dating her, he had introduced her to me. In the initial few months of us knowing each other, she had overstepped her boundaries multiple times. I think she assumed that since I never had a mother, I would automatically take her as my maternal figure, and she tried very hard to fill that gap, so to speak. But I had been without a mother for so long that I didn't really understand what it meant to have one. Any attempt of hers to discipline me or exert authority while they were dating and not married was met with a lot of hostility from my side. I could have behaved better, in hindsight, but I was a rebellious teenager, and to me, I was doing the best that I could. It became clear to her that I was not interested in a mother, and that the only way this could work was if we tolerated each other's presence and got along for Dad's sake. And this arrangement worked after their wedding, for the first few months at least. And I seriously and genuinely believe that it would have gotten better and the family would have been tighter, so to speak, if Stephanie hadn't come. Stephanie, now F36, is my stepsister and Anne's daughter. Dad had no idea about her when he married Anne, and Anne had never shared it with him. I don't blame her for it because it was a hard thing to talk about for her. Stephanie was the result of a teen pregnancy that Anne had with a man who was much, much older than her. She was groomed and then forced to carry the pregnancy to term. She was essentially a kid herself when she became a mother, and the only reason she agreed to carry the pregnancy to term was that she was assured by her abuser and his family that they would take up the entire responsibility of the kid and she would not have to be involved. And thankfully for her, they did not back out. So she had her daughter, and the daughter went to her biological father and lived there all her life. And had no contact with her groomer and her daughter, and she changed her city as soon as she turned 18 when Stephanie was 1 year old. She never had any contact with her and never disclosed this part of her past with anyone, according to her. She told Dad, and Dad told me that even her friends from college and work do not know about her daughter because she doesn't consider herself a mother in any dimension of the word. I don't know if this is how she thought to cope, but I guess she felt that since she had no contact with her daughter, and if she stopped mentioning her, maybe she would cease to exist in her mind. Unfortunately, that was not what God had planned for her. 6 months after her wedding to Dad, Stephanie showed up at home. I was the one who opened the door, and one look at her and I realized that I didn't like her. She was reeking of alcohol, and frankly, she looked like a drug addict. She would have been 19 at that point, so I really don't know why she came looking for mommy as an adult. I don't know what happened after that because I was left out of all family discussions regarding her. All I do remember is that she stayed with us for a while, and Dad, and used to have long discussions late into the night for a couple of days. I think 2 weeks after her arrival, she had been living with us for that entire duration. Dad came to my room and said that he wanted to talk to me. He told me that Stephanie would be living with us for a while longer until they could try and do something to get her life on track. I couldn't believe my ears. Even at that age, I knew that girl was a disaster and that she should not be in the house. I told Dad that that was really unfair, but he told me that he could not turn her away, knowing that she is Anne's family and that she needs help. He then told me the entire backstory of Stephanie and Anne. He said that Stephanie's biological father had passed away, and she had no real family left anymore, which is why she had come looking for her mom, and it would be very unfair to her if they turned her back and didn't help her out. I hated to admit it, but I knew he was right. That's the thing about Dad. He is a good man, and even though he didn't sign up for any of this, even if he had been lied to buy a mission, he would never do the wrong thing. He knew that it was important for him and as adults to be there for Stephanie, and even though this came as a huge shock to him, a bigger shock than it was to me, in all honesty, he did not back down from doing the right thing. And that is how, at the age of 15 years, I got a 19-year-old sister with whom I shared absolutely no affinity. Living with Stephanie was difficult, to say the least. The adjustment was hard on everyone, and added to this was the fact that the newest family member was an absolute brat. She was thoroughly entitled from the day she set foot inside the house. She thought that and would be fawning over her in guilt and that she would have everyone wrapped around her finger. It was true to some extent. And tried to manage her tantrums because she felt guilty about abandoning her daughter and involving my dad in this mess. Dad tolerated her nonsense because he felt that she was a troubled child and needed good parental figures to guide her and bring her on the correct path. I was the only one who had absolutely zero tolerance for Stephanie's bullshit. And because of that, the entire family dynamic gradually changed. The only balancing factor in the house was Dad, and even Stephanie had begun to listen to him and behave around him. And had a miraculous motherly transformation, and she just attached herself to Stephanie, and both of them together started singling me out for not playing into the entire happy family trope. And I never played into it because I just could not stand Stephanie. She had no job, she was doing nothing with her life. All she would do was sit at home and blast loud music all day. Dad used to go to work, and it was only Anne and her in the house when I came back from school, and she would just go nuts. It became extremely difficult for me to even function like a normal human being in the house. I tried to tolerate it as much as I could, but I finally reached my breaking point and spoke to Dad about it. He told me that I should have come sooner. That night, he told Stephanie that it had been more than 6 months of her living with us and that she needed to either find a job soon or look at higher education. She looked as if somebody had slapped her square in the face. I really don't know why she thought she was allowed to rot away and Dad would fund her entire life, but she did. And tried to cut in and take a stand for Stephanie, but Dad was having none of it. He didn't take my name in the discussion because he didn't want them to feel like I was poisoning him. He told Stephanie that she had a month to look for a job and that he would help her, but it was time she got her act together. To no one's surprise, she did not get her act together at all. There was no job by the end of the month, and at the 6-week mark, Dad reminded her again. A few weeks after that, she came home with the announcement that she was pregnant. Anne was overjoyed, God alone knows why, but Dad had had enough. He told her that he was not willing to fund her and now her child any longer, and that she was on her own. Stephanie probably had expected the exact opposite of this. She had thought that because of the pregnancy, Dad would stop being so hard on her. I actually overheard her say this to Anne. Anne tried to butt in and take her side, but I think Dad had reached his breaking point, too. There was nothing else to be done any longer, and Stephanie had no option but to leave. The house finally had some peace and quiet after about a year of her nonsense, but things always remained strained between Anne and me and Dad and Anne after that. Once she had gone, I got no news of Stephanie, not that I was interested in it anyway. She probably was in touch with Anne and Dad, but I can't be sure. I never asked, and they never told me. 2 years later, I went off to college in a different state, and things improved drastically for me. I went low contact with Anne and only stayed connected to Dad. That wasn't a problem for him, and he never forced me to maintain a connection with Anne, but boy, she became hostile. Whenever I went home for vacations, she would be snarky and rude, as if she didn't want me around. There was never any open conflict between us, and I tolerated her for Dad's sake, but things were way worse than before. In all honesty, we just couldn't stand each other anymore. It was palpable to everyone around us, and the air would be thick with tension whenever I went home, so I just stopped going. I used to call Dad over or go on trips, and that was that. To me, peace of mind was more important than being in that house, so I just chose that. Then I got busy with my job and life, and completely fell out of touch with Anne. Whatever I knew of her was via Dad. 2 days ago, I hosted a party. I got a huge promotion at work, and it is kind of a big deal, and I wanted to celebrate with everyone. I called Dad, and Aunt Rosa, her husband Mike, and their son Noel. Keith and I lived together, so he was obviously there. It was supposed to be an intimate get-together of family members I am close to. I invited, and out of courtesy I am too old now to keep bad blood between us. However, in hindsight, I was a fool to expect the same maturity from her because she overstepped her majorly that I think even Dad is never going to see her face again. What shocked me was that and walked in with Stephanie. Now I have had no contact with this woman for over 15 years, and I just could not fathom how anyone thought that bringing her along would be a good idea. I looked at my dad in disbelief and pulled him aside while Keith tried to lighten the mood. I asked him why she was here, and he said that and had told him that I had specifically invited Stephanie. I was furious, and I wanted both Anne and Stephanie to leave right away. I decided against it because I did not want to create a scene, but if I'm being honest, I should have gone ahead with kicking them out. I tried to defuse the situation, I really did, and Anne and Stephanie were behaving for the most part, so I even got a little comfortable with the entire situation. All through dinner, everyone asked me about my promotion, my work, and the like, except Stephanie. She sat there pouting and sulking, but I didn't pay much heed to her, as did no one else. I was actually relieved that she wasn't talking much because I had no desire to interact with her anyway. So all in all, thankfully the dinner went well, but I had no idea what was waiting for me at the end of it. Just as we were about to get up, and got up and said that she had a special announcement to make. Before I could even react, she literally squealed, "She's 53, and honestly that was so embarrassing," and revealed that Stephanie was expecting a baby. Everyone in the room went dead silent. All the people that were present, except Stephanie probably, knew that I had had lots of fertility struggles, and I was told only a year ago after multiple tests that I would never be able to have children. The news about Steph's pregnancy honestly felt like a slap to my face, and it felt as though all the pride of the day was sucked out. I tried to put on a brave face and congratulated her, but Dad literally hissed at Anne and told her to sit down. She tried to start some drama over Dad's reaction, but Noelle butted in and said something along the lines of, "Why are you even excited, and, isn't this like her 6th kid?" I genuinely spat my water out and looked at Anne with wide eyes. She started yelling at Noelle, but Aunt Rosa got up to defend him, and it all became a huge mess in my house where I couldn't even get a single word of what they were saying. In a couple of minutes, I had had enough, and I told all of them that I wanted them to leave and that they could not come into my house and disrespect me when I was the one hosting them. I then turned to Steph and told her that I had not invited her, and even if her mother had lied to her, she should have had the common sense to understand that it possibly could not have been me who was extending an invitation or an olive branch because we never liked each other, and we hadn't spoken to each other in over 15 years. To my utter amazement, she started crying, saying that I was just jealous of her fertility because I could never have kids of my own. I hate to admit it, but that one statement stung more than anything I have ever heard before. Thankfully, I kept my cool. I then told her that I was glad I had made something of myself and worked hard to create a name so that my only achievement was not shitting out kids the minute I could get pregnant. I don't think anyone had expected me to say something so vicious, and before I could say anything, Anne slapped me in front of everyone. She slapped me so hard that my head hurt. I don't exactly remember what happened in the next 2 minutes, but all I know is that by the time I had centered myself, everyone was out of the house, and Keith was sitting beside me apologizing for letting things escalate so much. I told him it wasn't his fault, but the entire situation has taken a huge toll on me. Dad has reached out to me, and so have Aunt Rosa, Uncle Mike, and Noelle, but I haven't responded to anyone other than Noelle. I am just not in the right headspace to talk to anyone right now. It's not just that they shed all over my party and achievements. They rubbed me the wrong way by poking fun at and mocking my biggest vulnerability and then proceeded to assault me in my own home. And I know Dad is not to blame for this because he could not have anticipated or controlled it, but I am still disappointed that he didn't do anything to defend me in front of everyone when Steph tried to make the day all about herself. Heck, it was Noelle, who was still a kid by the way, who had the guts to stand up to her bullshit and call her out publicly. I am too shaken by whatever has happened, and I don't think I will be talking to anyone in the family as of now. I just hope and pray that this chapter closes now and that I don't have to deal with Anne or Stephanie again. Update 1, you guys were right, and I should have known better. This is so not over. I had never outright hated Anne and Steph, but I just didn't like them. What they have resorted to now, however, conveniently puts them in the category of crazy, lying psychopaths who need to be kept away from humanity for its betterment. I have never met a worse duo of lying scums, and God knows why Anne has become blind to the antics of her daughter. She used to be sane, but now it seems like Steph controls her with the twiddle of her thumb. It's a sorry state of affairs for Anne, and I feel bad for her. She has lost all her individuality for a child who does not care two hoots about her. A week after the party, I had still not replied to anyone, so I had no idea what was going on. Anne and Stephanie came to my house. Heath opened the door and did not even invite them in. Steph started screaming at the door, saying that she wanted to talk to me and that I had ruined her life completely. I heard the screaming and rushed to the door, where Stephanie was crying, and Anne said that I had committed the most unpardonable sin and that they needed me to pay for it. I told them they were out of their minds if they thought that I would entertain them for even a second after they slapped me in my own home. Anne told me that I had to pay for my sins and that they knew I had spiked Stephanie's food, which had caused her to miscarry. I could not help but laugh at the bizarre accusation. I told them that Stephanie had come unannounced and uninvited, and I had zero idea that she was expecting. How could I have magically procured a substance, spiked her food, and caused her to miscarry when I had no idea that she would be coming, and that too, pregnant? They just said that they knew it was me, and there was no other way that something like this could have happened, and guys, I lost my shit. And kept on saying that I had to pay for my sins and whatnot, and Keith asked her what she meant by pay. And she meant literal payment. She wanted me to give money to her useless child who was probably faking an abortion, and maybe even the entire pregnancy. I was furious and tired at the same time. I told them that I had enough money and that I would pay them whatever sum they wanted if they could prove that I was the one who caused the abortion. I told them to have a look at the CCTV footage and see for themselves. That was when they knew that their bluff was called, and they started squirming in their shoes. And the thing is, I am a lawyer. I know when a person is lying. That's literally my entire job. I knew they had been caught and that there was no miscarriage. There probably was no baby either. I then told them that they needed to go with me to the hospital right now and confirm the abortion, or I would press charges against both of them on and for assault and trespassing, and on Stephanie for trespassing and harassment. Guys, you should have seen the way they tried to flee. Keith and I ran after them, and we took them to the hospital. Both of them were in tears by the time we reached and were begging us not to go ahead with it. And had the audacity to say that I was tormenting her poor daughter more after what I had done. I told her to shut her trap because her poor daughter was a grown-ass woman of 36, and she needed to stop playing the victim every chance she got. The tests took some time, but at the end of it, I knew what the result would be. Stephanie was not pregnant, and she had been faking it the entire time. I don't know whether I felt rage or smug. I just knew that I wanted both of them out of sight that very minute. I thought I would need to down an entire bottle of wine to deal with all that had happened. When we sat in the car, Keith told me to send a text and the reports to everyone, detailing what had actually happened. He said that it was time to expose them completely and cut them off for good. I have done just that, and I feel so much relief. I know now that they won't have the guts to get in touch with me again. I think I'm going to go no contact with Dad, too. I just feel that he is somehow responsible for inviting all this mess into my life, and even if he isn't at fault, I don't want to deal with him right now. I have faced assault and harassment, and an achievement of mine has been ground to dust because of the antics of his wife and her daughter. I can't help but feel mad at him. He was the one who allowed Stephanie inside my house. He could have asked me whether I had actually invited her or not. He could have cross-checked, but it was easier for him to feign convenience, and it just hurts me a lot. I know I am not going to tolerate any more of their drama, and if they try to as much as knock at my door again, I will just get a restraining order against them. I don't care if I burn every single bridge with the family, but I just don't have it in me to deal with this anymore. Update 2, for all those who were hoping for a dramatic update, I have some news for you. Dad has filed for divorce from Anne. After he got to know what the mother-daughter had done, he was furious and threw Anne out of the house. I had a very long talk with him, and both of us got very emotional. In the fight with Anne, she revealed that she had known all along that Stephanie wasn't pregnant, but she already had 5 kids, none of the baby daddies stay, yes, all of them are different, but Dad thinks they pay child support, and she could not hold a job for long. Anne thought that if they tried this drama, they could try and get money out of me, which would help Steph out. She told Dad that both of them had resorted to this only because I had chosen to sever ties, and they knew that if they asked like family, I would not have helped Stephanie out. Well, of course, I wouldn't have helped her out, her brood is not my responsibility. This is why they had hatched this elaborate plan to basically extort money from me. Anne justified herself by saying that since I could never have kids, and had had a promotion, all the extra money could actually go to someone in need. Dad told her that this was my hard-earned money, and I could even wipe my crap with it if I wanted, and I didn't owe anyone anything. They had a huge fight, wherein kept defending Stephanie and refused to take accountability for her actions while deflecting the entire blame to me. That was when Dad realized that there was no point in talking to her. She was beyond any level of sanity, and there was no redeeming what she did. He told her that he would be filing for divorce and asked her to move out. He apologized profusely, telling me that he could never forgive himself for what he allowed to take place. I told him that it wasn't entirely his fault, but that I needed some time to get over the entire ordeal and bring myself back to normalcy. The last few weeks had been very draining for me. I was actually looking forward to relaxing a little bit after my promotion, but this entire family drama just did not let that happen. Aunt Rosa and Uncle Mike called me and offered me support. They actually encouraged me to press charges, but at this point, I just want this mess to be over and live in peace. They have been very understanding of the situation, and that is all that I expected from anyone, in all honesty. I have no idea what Stephanie is doing and how she is managing, but she and Anne have had a falling out because Anne now blames her for the breakdown of her marriage. It's honestly a shit show, if you ask me, and I have asked everyone to leave me out of it. I have got no contact with Dad as well for the time being, and even Aunt and Uncle know that they don't have to talk about the Anne and Dad situation with me. That's the biggest win that I could have asked for in this situation, and I am just glad that this is over. Hopefully, this will be my last update because I don't have it in me to tolerate even a single moment more of this. Thanks, and goodbye, for good.